Okay, a very good day to everyone. My name is Soumitra Dutta. I'm a professor at Cornell University in New York. And it's my distinct honor and pleasure, and actually a privilege, to moderate this session today, the webinar with Dean Sherif Kamel. And Dean Kamel, if you don't mind, I'll call you Sherif, as I always do. So Sherif and I, we have been friends and colleagues for many years, more than 2 decades, I think so. That goes back a long time, 3 decades. We both work in the same domain of information technology, so we share common research interests. We have shared some common trajectories and some professional development paths also. Sherif has been the founding dean of the AUC School of Business. I was a founding dean at the Cornell College of Business. Both of us have had a number of interesting professional challenges and professional achievements and professional other kinds of experiences over the years. And I was delighted when Sherif wrote this book that you all have heard about, that I have a copy of here with me. It's called Leading Change in Challenging Times, Lessons of Disruption and Innovation from Egypt. I had the pleasure of reading an earlier manuscript of this book. And so it's very nice to actually hold the book in my hand now. And Sherif, congratulations on having written this book. I think it's wonderful. Let me just read for the people joining us at the seminar, a couple of just a few comments, a number of comments in the book from a number of leading academics and other kinds of leaders in the business professional world. So Dan Leclerc, who's the CEO of the Global Business School Network, so he writes, start reading this book to learn more about leadership and disruption in a complex, dynamic environment. And you will soon realize that it has so much more to offer. It is about the personal growth of a truly talented and dedicated leader, blossoming of the respected institution he leads, and the boundless potential of the country he loves. And I think the many other wonderful comments, but this comment from Dan, I think, encapsulates what is unique also about the book. It sort of captures you as a person, as a leader. It captures the institution as you actually build the institution up. And of course, all this is happening in the context of tremendous change in a great country, Egypt. So congratulations, Sherif, once again. And let me begin with a very, very simple question. Why did you think about writing the book? And why the title?
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Soumitra, for this warm and wonderful introduction. Indeed, it has been a long journey to finish the book. And I'm, as you just said, delighted that I can hold the book in my hands. It's been quite a long journey. But why the title and why the book? I think we live in a time where we have challenges all around us. We all say that the only constant change is actually the transformations that are taking place, and we're being challenged. Sometimes those challenges are social, economical, sometimes political. Those changes sometimes are close to us domestically, sometimes they're regional. Obviously, we see so many global challenges, and they affect the markets. They affect how we think. They affect we as deans of business schools, how we set up our programs, our research, our activities, so that to support the graduates, the future leaders, entrepreneurs, and policymakers to be able to be as impactful as possible. And we cannot run away from change. And the way I see it, the only way to manage change, I know it's not easy, but it's the only way to manage is actually to accept it, to embrace it, and to try to drive it. So how do we deal with all this? How do we adapt? And it's very important to adapt to stay relevant. And to overcome those challenges, we always need to be thinking creatively. You and I come from the IT industry, and it has been years, drop the pandemic aside, it has been years that we've seen the disruption coming. But many people see the negative part of the disruption. Actually, disruption creates opportunities, opens up windows for change and for development. and going back to the book, this book was written, or I started writing it in June 2014. So it had nothing to do with the pandemic. But yet, even back then, in the context of a business school, in an emerging economy that is going through constant transformation, I thought the book could be useful for the community of the school, not just within the campus, but also the ecosystem where the school is part of. So what is the book? I think the book is a hybrid version of three things. The first is sharing the experience. So it's part memoir. It's the journey, my own journey in the government, a short spell in the private sector, also volunteering until today in civil society and working with NGOs. Secondly, part institutional memory. The very school I'm very proud to be part of. I'm a product of that school, the AUC School of Business, which has been around since, actually this year we celebrate 75 years. So it's been around since 1947. And the bigger gem institution, and that is AUC, which has been around for close to 103 years. The third part is institutional business and inspirational institutional business leadership. How do we navigate the changes? With a zoom on my first spell as dean from 2009 to 2014. What do I cover here? A whole lot. And I see those things related to each other. I cannot just draw a line between my own personal experience and how I actually operate as dean of the school and the environment around us. So I touch upon, like Dan said, rightly so, Egypt. The whole focus is on the potential of Egypt. It's youth. 60% of the population are under the age of 30. Most of them are in their teens. And then the economy and politics, we can't just remove them from each other. They affect each other. Ethics, culture, and it goes in line with lifelong learning. But then the increasingly space of entrepreneurial culture, mindset, not just building up enterprises, but how would people think, whether they are tech-based or non-tech-based, it doesn't matter. But it's how people think and how they want to have an impact on the future.
Well, Sherif, I think, you have succeeded in capturing so many important dimensions in your book. I was very impressed myself. I thought it was a good inspiration for others to try and emulate at least the direction in which you have tried to capture these various complex threads in your story. I would love to get into a little bit more of the broader issues about the country, the institution, and your individual leadership. But before I do so, a very practical question about writing a book like this. I mean, how much effort did it take? What was the most challenging part? What did you learn about how you write a book and memoir like this?
That's a big question, my friend. And I'm not sure I have the answer, but I'll tell you what happened. And I think it touches upon one thing that I truly believe affected the way I wrote the book and actually affected my journey, which is the family. For me, the family matters. Your small family, the bigger family, how one is actually brought up really affected, at least in my case, how I thought throughout my journey. So I have to go back actually 123 years and remember my grandfather. And by the way, that's my immediate grandfather, not my great-great-grandfather. So this is 123 years ago, specifically in 1899. He was a lawyer. He was an entrepreneur in his own right, but he was also an educator. The entrepreneurial part came through when he realized that all publishing houses at the time were not owned by Egyptians. They were founded by Italians, by Brits, by French in Egypt. So he decided to change that. So he actually established a publishing house. His motto was, we need to spread the knowledge, push people to read, push people to learn more. Because if we only teach and provide opportunities for men, we will be having the prospects of half the community. But we open up the opportunities also for women, to learn, to get exposed, to have job opportunities, then the society can reach its true potential. And guess what? A couple of months later, someone knocks on his door, a famous Egyptian who wrote a book that is titled The Liberation of Women. In Arabic, it's Tahrir al-Mar'a. Obviously, this was a taboo back then. You don't go there, but he decided otherwise. So he actually opted to print that book. And obviously, printing that book in a way signaled the end of him and the publishing house as an entrepreneur, because nobody would come back and print books in his own publishing house, which was called in Arabic, Dar al-Taraqi. So the exact translation would be the place where you can become better or get promoted. And it was sort of a metaphor for learning to take your destiny to the next level. So I think this was an inspiration for me, but not just that. I come from a family that many of its members, well into their 50s and 60s, despite successful careers, they decided to keep learning. So they got their PhDs in their 50s and their 60s. So there's no ceiling there. Surely growing up, this affected how I thought about all this. And one of them, actually, one of my uncles, also had a publishing house in the 30s and the 40s of last century, and wrote a poem. He actually wrote short stories. Some of them actually became movies. Well, that doesn't give you any indication I'm going to turn this into a movie, that's for sure. It doesn't even apply. But the thing is, I was brought up in a family that want to share what they know with the others. So I think that's what actually pushed me in that direction. And you and I, like any other scholar, we do articles, research papers, technical reports, and the like. And maybe one of those things that actually came through the pandemic was the Nile View. Basically, why did I start the Nile View series? Because sitting there, locked down, can't go anywhere, looking at that beautiful view, I came up with the idea. But that actually takes me to why I thought of writing the book, is basically to share what I know. Not necessarily it will be applicable to anybody, but surely it's important to share a journey, to share the ups and downs, the successes and the failures, the challenges and the opportunities, the twists and turns. All this, in my mind, reflects everybody's journey, because everybody cannot have it all right. But the most important thing is that when you do something wrong, you need to learn from it, not to repeat it again. I know it's easier said than done, but that's why I thought of the book, what pushed me to write it. And basically the content reflects a journey, whether at the personal level or at the organizational level.
Now, for me, actually, when I read the manuscript originally also, what I really found both touching and also very inspirational was the link that you made to your grandfather, to your father, to your family. I think that was very, very important, because certainly that's an important part of who we are as individuals today. And they play a very important role. They're very important people in our lives, and they play a very important role in helping shape ourselves and how we shape the world around us. For viewers who do not know the Nile View, it's a wonderful newsletter, blog, articles that Dean Kamel, Sherif, writes periodically. How often do you write it, Sherif? You write it every
month.
Every month, because I get a copy of it and I look forward to reading it eagerly. It really reflects, I think, once again, this notion of, it started in the pandemic, but I think it reflects a lot of the changes that are happening around us and how we should perhaps look at these changes in a positive, constructive manner. So Sherif, look forward to receiving and reading further editions of Nile View. But let's come back to the book. And if I had to ask you, because the book is, of course, very broad in terms of covering individual, institutional, and the national, and you've already also highlighted some of the messages, but are there any sort of messages that you think you would like young people, the young generation, students at AUC or other young professionals to take from your experience? I think you have a lot of experience, and what would be some messages that they can take as they lead their lives?
Oh, absolutely. Like you said, the book covers a broad number of subjects, but there are 4 key messages that I think are spread across the book, across the 9 different chapters. And I go back and forth between how I see things and the reflection through the activities of the School of Business, but also through the society. And I end up with 4 specific messages. Well, the first, it's all about people. It's all about human capital. I see this as the most important asset in every society. It's the game changer. Even in our industry, Soumitra, we talk about hardware and software and systems and the like, but the human factor remains the deciding factor. So that's the first message, and that's societal at large. If I go down a notch at the organizational level, everybody wants to be successful. Everybody has an idea, but it's how you put everything together to be able to succeed, and not just succeed today, but have sustainable success. I see sustainable success requiring a number of building blocks. And of course, there is no one size that fits all, but you need to adapt those building blocks depending on the context. To start off with a vision, an articulated vision. What do you want to do? Together with that, a purpose. Why is the organization there? That purpose needs to be shared by the people leading this organization and part and parcel of the team. Next, you need to have a strategy. And we talk about strategic planning. Well, strategic, how long that is these days, it depends because things are changing very fast. But regardless what you put on paper, and this has to be well thought, the efficiency of the execution, the resources that are available, the timeliness of the execution. And then you and I know very well what Peter Drucker said years ago, that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So what is the institutionalized corporate culture? It has to be well institutionalized across the organization, not up there in the mind of 1 or 2. With that, where are the checks and balances? So you need proper governance. Moving on, so you have all these building blocks. Where is the team, the committed team, the passionate team, the dedicated team who can turn all this into a reality? So if I were to put a shell around that, the policies, the procedures, and the like is the enabling environment. So I know it's a lot to ask, but for me, my experience with the pluses and minuses, the ups and downs, when one of these elements went wrong, the formula was disrupted. And we needed to go back and fix things. And I left the most important thing to last, because I think people take it for granted, but nobody should take it for granted. And here I quote Winston Churchill when he said, attitude is a little thing that can make a big difference. I think attitude within the organization is huge. So you can have all this, but if you don't have the right attitude from the team, and by the way, when I talk about the team, is top down, bottom up. It's the energy across the entire organization that counts. So that's the organization level. Moving to the individual level. So I started with the society, the organization, that was the next second message. The third message is to the individual. Learning and development comes in different shapes and forms. Degrees, skills, training, observation, exposure, reading books, talking to people, talking to friends, getting inspired. And that's a lifetime journey. It is never a destination. You never stop learning. I actually repeatedly told my students that sometimes I think of myself as a student of life, or that I'm a student for life. And I try to learn something new every day. And I know you do the same, but people need to understand that that counts. That makes a whole lot of difference in how people perform, how people improve, and how people take their game to the next level. The fourth, which is all about the future, I'm very passionate about the intersection between people and technology. We called it before technology, and then we moved to digital transformation. All this maybe is bundled into innovation and creativity and the like, but the power and reach of digital transformation and the innovative capacities of not necessarily entrepreneurs, but those who have an entrepreneurial mindset, and definitely with the offering of the emerging startups, can change lives and livelihoods forever, and can drive economic growth and prosperity. with the one caveat. This has to be universal. We've talked before over the years about the digital divide. If that's not universal, we exacerbate the digital divide. But if everybody has access to these platforms, everybody has something to add. Everybody has something to give. Just need an opportunity.
Well, you've raised so many points, and I want to pick up on a few of those points in the discussion as we go forward. At the same time, I want to also involve our audience, members who joined us today for this webinar, to please pose your questions. So please pose your questions, and then I will, weave them into my questions as we go along. So I think you have the option to be able to enter your questions at the bottom of the screen, and then I'll receive them, and then I will weave them into the discussion. So let me pick up on the many of those points. Well, let me pick up on one of those points right now, and we'll pick up some more of them as we go along. The first point I'll pick up is what he said is the most important: human capital. So how do we handle this challenge on the human capital side? Countries like Egypt, I come from India originally. India is another country, similar country, but many other countries have a lot of very bright young people. And I sometimes feel sad that we are unable to actually help them to leverage their potential, just because we are unable to provide good quality education to so many young people in the country. The people who are able to and lucky enough to study at AUC or study at IIT in India are the privileged few. How can we do something reasonable or meaningful for the rest, people who are being left behind?
Very interesting question, and a spot on question as well. I mean, business schools around the world are an integral fabric of the society, and they keep on impacting society. So I see the role of business schools not just confined to the borders of the campus, but also offering community development service and activities to the society. The more they do that, the more diversified they have a portfolio of activities and services, the better and sustainable and scalable impact that's going to cause to the community. Obviously, India is a big country. Egypt, in the context of where we are, we're the largest country in our region. So we both, for example, economies deal with a problem sometimes I see as an advantage if we can better utilize what I call as the society's most important asset, and that is to offer not a one-size-fits-all opportunity to learn and get exposed. I see, for example, potential in Egypt, huge potential in vocational training. Not every single soul needs to have a university degree, but advanced training and professional development can open up opportunities for others who might better fit than the classical disciplines that you and I have gone to 20, 30, and 40 years ago. The more we provide a diverse offerings in terms of program, the better we're serving the individual, and the more we're actually closing a gap that we even have in the market in Egypt. So we're not short of graduating people from universities or schools, by the way. There are almost 1 million people who go into the job market every year. But you talk to the graduates, they can find a job. You talk to the employers, they don't find the graduates with the right skill set or knowledge they're looking for. So where is that gap going? That gap is going, or is coming from the fact that there are clusters where students would sort of choose, which is a bit far and distant from what the market wants. So the adaptation of the future of learning and what needs to happen in the classroom, how it's happening in the classroom, what delivery approaches to use, what exposure the students need to have versus what kind of skills, what does the employer wants to see in the graduates of 2025 and 2024 and 2030, so that gap is closed. And I see there is an opportunity there, but we need to drop the legacy systems, the traditional, conventional way of looking at education that wasn't successful over the past couple of decades. It will never be successful moving forward.
So you have been an education institution for a long time, as I have been also. How ready do you think we are as institutions to change? So you're saying legacies has to be changed, things are there, ripe for change, but how ready are we as an institution to change?
So that's another very interesting question. We cannot preach something that we cannot practice. So it's interesting that you say that, because I've been saying to my colleagues, don't consider me as a dean of a business school. Consider me as a CEO of an intellectual enterprise. And what I meant by that, we need to be quick, we need to be agile, we need to be innovative. I understand we operate in an academic setting, yet the more close we are to the business community, the civil society, even government, because many of our research, we intend that it impacts policy. So unless we are well integrated with that, we will not be able to be part of that change. We will not be able to embrace that change or even introduce it and engage with it. And on that note, by the way, me, you, many of our colleagues, we talk about change, we push for change, we promote change. Sometimes we even claim that we like change, but nobody of us wants to change. But we've seen that change over the last 2 years. People change, maybe because they were out of options, but also because they realize that there are opportunities out there. Does this mean that I expect everything is going to change? Absolutely not. And the level of change is going to change from one organization to the other, from one country to the other, from one region to the other, from one industry to the other. But surely it opened up opportunities for everybody to think there are other ways of doing things. And surely one of those other ways would be to deliver in a different way and different substance the quality and the content of education everybody's offering today.
Well, the many questions coming up, Sherif, as you can imagine, your book and also your thoughts have triggered many reactions and interesting observations. So I'll pick up a few and I'll weave them into our own discussion. So linked to this notion of change, Sahar Assem is asking that if there are undeclared needs in government institutions and when innovative digital solutions are proposed, it may shock the traditional administration. So how can I achieve a balance in the equation behind changing the traditional institutional thought and old and updated laws, citizen needs, digital transformation, and reducing the unspoken needs and procedures? So more in a, let's say, perhaps in a government context, the same issues in terms of how does innovation, digital solutions progress?
Yeah. Well, thank you for the question, Sahar. And I think it's a question that reflects what everybody wants to see in the government services, how they're quick, how they're efficient, how they're transparent. And I think digitization, some people call it digitalization, or as a term, digital transformation, comes in different shapes and forms. And by the way, it's not just automating what we have today. Otherwise, the problems we have today will still be there, yet it's going to be automated problems. What we need to look at is actually the processes, changing how we do stuff, and then introduce the platforms that you and I have been teaching for years. Well, does this lead to just having in a bigger sense, a digital economy? Absolutely, yes. But that's a long-term objective. But moving there, it provides more effectiveness, more efficiency, more readiness. And when you do that, or actually to do that, you need to have the personnel in charge who will be able to operate in that environment. But they will not be able to operate in an environment unless you have the policies and the procedures who enable them to operate in that environment. So it's an ecosystem by itself. And I see, for example, in the context of Egypt, a clear direction that is going in that far over the past couple of years. We're seeing the early results of that, but these things do not come overnight. And the bigger the country, the longer the time, but also the readiness of the community is a key factor, because there is a difference between having platforms that are out there, but also having people who use those platforms efficiently to be able to get an added value out of them.
Yeah, I think this is a very important observation I'm making. I think, as they say sometimes, technology is changing exponentially, but human beings will live in a linear world.
Oh, yeah.
And so
Oh,
there's
yeah.
a growing gap between the exponential possibilities of technology, innovations, other solutions, and the ability of human beings to actually even visualize it. And even if you visualize it, actually adapt to it. It's an interesting challenge.
Adaptation is, I mean, you picked the right word. Adaptation is unbelievable. And adaptation should be institutionalized to scale it up, because otherwise the impact is not realized.
Yeah. Now, there are many other questions, and I'm trying to see how I can actually put them in different buckets. So Nagla is asking an interesting question, which is, what is the one top decision that you're glad you made, and the one thing you'd have done differently, looking back?
Oh, is it our own Nagla or a different Nagla?
I don't know. It says Nagla. It could be our own Nagla also, but
okay.
I don't know. It just says Nagla on the
one.
So
the one decision I come again, please, Soumitra.
One decision that basically you're glad you made, the top decision, and the one that you'd have done differently.
Okay, so let me just write that.
Making you think.
Sorry?
Making you think.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll actually give two decisions, one that is institutional and one that is personal. One that required thoughtfulness, and the other one was sort of quick. Let me start with the institutional. So I became dean in 2009, and those of us working in academia, and especially in business schools, appreciate and understand the importance of accreditation and continuous improvement as a culture that needs to be built across the institution. So AUC School of Business applied for ACSB back in 2001. We got accredited in 2006. When I became dean in 2009, I wanted to be part of that group that called themselves as Triple Crown. Back then in the day, there were, I think, 70 business schools out of, God knows, 14,000, 13,000, something around that figure, who were Triple Crown. So I went to my team and we decided to, let's go that path. And they said, we have ACSB. And then I said, yeah, but let's go for Equus. Let's go for AMBA. And they said, which one first? And I said, you know what? That's the surprise. We're going to go both in parallel. And of course, everybody thought I was nuts. And I went through the same cycle I went through 10 years before, when I was part of the team that worked on the ACSB file. Resentment, pushback, and the like. But the question is, long-term, once those people engage, feel ownership, everybody was thrilled when in back-to-back months in 2014, we became accredited by AMBA in April and Equus in May. And we became the 71st school to be Triple Crown. And you know that better than anybody else. It is that difficult that 8 years later, we're still hovering around 102 business schools in the world out of 14,000. So I think that was a decision. Of course, I never regretted, but I took the heat. But I think it was all worth it. Another decision that was on the spot, but that's way back. That takes me back when I was a student. That tells you how the mind works. So I was in my senior year, and many of my colleagues, if they are on the call, heard me say that before. But that tells you a lot on the importance of taking a decision and being accountable for it and responsible. So I was actually in my senior year. I'm just about to graduate, and I was getting into an economics class. And forgive me, all the economists on the call. And I heard the faculty member saying, assuming 1 + 1 = 2. And I said, no. It stops there. I cannot assume that 1 + 1 = 2. That's a given. Of course, I will go into a debate with the professor. He didn't like what I said. I pushed back. He almost threatened to kick me out of the class. You know what? In a split second, I decided, you know what? It's not just I'm dropping the course. I'm dropping the major. And I did. I was in my senior year, which means I had to take all my, or most of my 400 level courses in my senior year. This was an abrupt decision, and that's not typical of me, but it is those kind of decisions. If they work for you, people think that's the guy. If it blows in your face, people say, this was a spontaneous decision that really worked bad, but it worked for me because in my entire life, I'm an extremely practical person. I see things on the ground. I cannot operate in what and ifs scenarios, right, left, and center. So for me, at the age of 20, assuming 1 + 1 = 2 was just, I'm not continuing here. What would I have done differently? Maybe that's 100 things that I could have done differently. But if I would choose one thing, I've always wanted to be a diplomat. My father was a diplomat, so I wanted to be a diplomat. And my father means a lot to me. Meant a lot to me, and still is. I decided to study economics, as I just said, at AUC, but also political science at Cairo University, a very elite school faculty of economics and political science. Passed the first year in both ends, passed the second year in both ends, went to the third year, passed at AUC, difficult time at Cairo University, but that was not the problem. The problem was they asked me for the original paper. And that's where digital transformation comes in, and the bureaucracy and the red tape that I think in some countries, including my own, if we did not invent it, we mastered it. So I was asked to provide the original papers of my high school diploma. I can't have two versions. A version should be in one end, a copy in the other end. So I said, I can't. The original are there. Anyway, I go through an episode with the administration, which is written in details in the book. Maybe it's better that people read it. And then I decided I did not push really hard. And I decided to drop that dream of finishing. I was studying here economics and at the faculty at Cairo University Political Science. I wanted to finish that and become a diplomat, because of course you can come from any different background, but I thought I need to study political science to become a diplomat. That was how my mind was set. And I think the day I decided to drop that other degree is the day I changed my entire career. So I would, if I go back in time, I would push back and continue that other degree.
Well, Sherif, it's not too late. So as you say, you learn lifelong. So you can always, diplomats have a long career. So now there are a couple of questions around the family dimension. And of course, I'll read one of them, there are many of them, but I'll read one of them. Adel Bashai, he's saying, I've known Dean Sherif for over 3 decades. I loved his reference to his grandfather and his family, which seems to tie up with my own life. I admire his very charm of mind and linking his personal experience with his talk on human capital, organizational strategy, culture, building blocks. Hearty congratulations on a Herculean task. So he's basically very positive giving, and there are many comments like that. I just took one as an example. And linked to that, I'll ask a question from Tim Mescon. I think both of us know him very well, Tim. So he's saying, Sherif, you focus wonderfully on the history of family and experiences. And the question is, have we today lost focus on this context? Does this also align with the growing power of storytelling in creating more powerful and memorable messages?
Brilliant question from Tim. But let me first say that Professor Bashai does not just know me for 3 decades. He was my professor. I attended with him many, many courses, and a mentor remains to be one of my mentors. And I'm truly grateful to his friendship more than anything else over the years. Well, Tim, my friend, we should not lose compass when it comes to family. And I agree with you. They matter. They are a project. They are part and parcel of who we are. And it's not an addition that we need to add on. And I agree, the storytelling is an incredible learning experience. And by the way, when I decided to, and again, that's in the book, obviously, when I decided to step down in 2014 as dean in my first spell, I had back to sabbatical. But the reason why I actually stepped down was that I've always tried to have that balance between family and work, family and work. But then I realized that that balance is going out of hands. It started to get tilted towards work. So what did I do? I kept on trying for a year. Didn't work. And I have to give it to my colleagues, and especially the president of the university back then, my good friend, Dr. Lisa Anderson, who actually offered all sorts of options. And I said, you know what? Let me step down. We had a plan. We did most of it. Let me go and spend more time with my family. And that's what inspired actually writing the book. So I agree with you. More people should really showcase how important family is, not as a separate entity, but as an integrated, complemented entity in anybody's success. You can't just, they don't work in silos, but they actually enrich each other's experience and help us move on.
Okay, thank you so much. Two questions around technology, and you can, one from Professor Galal Eddin. He says, hello, Sherif. The IT infrastructure, especially the internet, is generally poor in Egypt with very uneven access across the country. How do you see entrepreneurs managing to overcome that obstacle? And then there was a related question on the other side from Hakeem Meshreki. He's saying, I'm curious to know Dr. Sherif's opinion on the metaverse as a big disruption happening when there's a big interaction between humans in a virtual environment. So how do you see the metaverse affecting lives in a positive, negative way? And can this have an impact on future of education?
Okay, hi Galal. Good to have you here in the webinar. Well, that's a question that should be addressed to the Minister of ICT, not me, but I'll give it a shot anyway. I think there has been sort of a slowdown in the infrastructure 2 years ago, up until maybe 2019, and there has been massive investments in the internet infrastructure in Egypt, totaling over $2 billion US. And I understand and I know there is further investment that are pouring into that sector. And yes, it is extremely important that not just Cairo and Alexandria and the big cities and the surrounding environment should have better access than the others, but it has to be equally. To my point, that unless we have universal access to the internet, not just the entrepreneurs, but people who want to study, people who want to work, people who want to capitalize on the digital infrastructure will not have the same opportunity, and that can exacerbate the divide that existed and still exists, and not just in technology, but in other aspects as well. So I agree with you. It's still, there is a long way to go, but I know from the plans of the ICT sector, mainly the ministry, obviously supported by the government, there is further investment in the infrastructure. Hakeem, metaverse, that's the $1 million question. It's not just education. I think anything we do is changing because of technology, because of the opportunities that are enabled through technology. We talk, we hear, we know, we read about the fourth industrial revolution and the impact of artificial intelligence and the like. But Soumitra wrote loads on this and the innovations coming our way. What we've seen so far is barely scratching the surface. So yes, indeed, it's going to change the future of learning, the methods of learning. And it's not just, by the way, in person versus online, but it's the dimensions, the diversity, the methods that are going to be used. I believe it's going to be different. And I think that's for the better. Because I think the notion, the classical notion of a faculty and students sitting in one too many listening, or maybe sometimes in a seminar, this is going to disappear. It's going to be more interaction, more out of the class, more out of the campus activities, and they will reflect the newly formed, that I don't have a complete picture of yet, but the newly formed future of learning.
Sherif, there are a number of questions about the book, where people can buy the book. So, I assume it's from the AUC Press, but do you have any suggestions on that? Where can they buy the book?
Well, thank you for asking. at this point, the only venue to buy the book is actually through Amazon. But I'm working with my colleagues. There is a possibility, hopefully, by the end of or near the end of April, it might be available at the AUC bookstore, both in the new campus and in downtown campus. But as it stands, it's available on all the markets. And I'm sorry to say, and I don't have an answer for that, by the way. It's on all the market, the Amazon market, except Amazon.eg. And don't ask me why, because I don't have the answer.
Well, hopefully it'll be available more easily in Egypt very soon, because there are many people who are asking about where they can buy the book. But on the issue of book writing, Tarek Salah is asking that, saying, first of all, very motivating talk. Thank you, Dr. Sherif. And then Tarek is saying that having written a few draft scripts, especially during the pandemic, I would like to hear more about his final steps after having written a script. What comes next? And maybe on that question, I'll add my own question to you, is that, is there a certain routine in writing a book? And writing a book like this is a no small task. Is there a routine that you follow in doing this? I mean, any tips and guidelines?
I wouldn't call them tips and guidelines. I call them my experience with writing the book. So like any scholar, my friend, I've written short articles, I've edited books on IT and other subjects, but this was my first book. Just to let you know, I had a plan to finish the book in 3 years. I finished it in 7.5 years. But you also have to understand, I'm extremely, to the core, meticulous. To the extent that the book is, by the way, 525 pages. I wrote it from start to finish 48 times. And every single time I used to adjust stuff, not just a word or two or a sentence or two or a paragraph or two. And I was blessed by several people who actually wrote the book and gave me feedback, including my good friend Soumitra. And that also made me think, let's get those perspectives, because these are those people I trust, how the book can actually deliver the message I wanted to deliver. So can you imagine reading it 48 times, start to finish? So it's a journey. It's all worth it. Don't get bored. When you feel like you need a break, just take a break, a week or two. Probably you regret it, because when you come back, you say, I wanted to add something, but what was it? But it's a wonderful journey, and there is nothing beats touching the final product and reaching the finish line. So I hope this helps. But it's and the more you are passionate about the book, about the ideas and the purpose of the book, I have no doubt that you're going to deliver the goods.
So, Sherif, touching the book is still very important, the physical dimension.
Absolutely. 100%.
So it's an interesting question of how we'll see this mix of the physical and virtual actually coming up in our daily lives.
Oh, yeah.
Questions, many more questions. I will only be able to take some more questions in the limited time we have. But Salma is asking 2 questions. So how have your priorities changed when you first started being dean? And what are the qualities of a good educator?
So come again, how was the priorities when I left?
How have your priorities changed when you first started being dean? So the professional, I guess even personal work life, I'm just expanding from there, but how do you see your own leadership evolving?
So this year marks 30 years for me at AUC as a faculty member. So I've been around for quite a while. When I became dean, this was 2009, so I must have been 18 years plus. I've done everything, by the way, at the school, as an assistant professor, as a professor, as director of education, executive education, as associate dean of executive education. But all this you can put aside. Being the dean is a completely different perspective. And I touch upon, it's a good question, I touch upon this in the book as well. It's an incredible portfolio. And yes, it affects your priorities. And yes, it's almost 16, 17 hours a day, because You deal with the faculty, you deal with the students, you deal with the staff, you deal with the corporate partners, you deal with fundraising, you deal with new projects, and you deal with local and international organizations. So, but you need to organize yourself. You give it your best shot, you're passionate about it, you work hard, you get there. Not all the time. You make mistakes, that's for sure. So my priorities was, first and foremost, we have a plan that we worked really hard to put it together with all the constituents, and I wanted to reach the finish line. And there is no way, when there is a will, there is a way. Of course, you get into bumpy roads. Sometimes it's rewarding. Don't get me wrong. This is not a rosy environment, but it's a challenging environment, and it challenges your mind. So my priority, for example, if I share with you one priority, was to surround myself with very smart people to keep on challenging me all the time. Otherwise, we will not be able to reach what we wanted to reach on time and the way we wanted to reach it. Does this sometimes make my life easy? Absolutely not. Sometimes am I being challenged more than I wish for? Half the time. But did it help us all as an institution to become better? Yes. And there's nothing, absolutely nothing, that makes me more proud than the numbers of leaders from the school that came through and are part and parcel leading different entities at the school over the last 10 plus years. And I think this was based on the model of empowering people, delegating stuff to them, and letting them, by the way, make mistakes and fail. Why did I do that, by the way? Because someone, and I owe him a lot, someone who was my professor and my first boss for the first 16 years did that to me. I was very young, but he gave me responsibility. And he asked me to just go, do it. Come back to me when you need something. That, for me, was a big thing. But I appreciated that, and I learned a lot through that experience. So I was adamant to try to replicate this with my colleagues.
In fact, Wafa Sabri mentions a question linked to your comment right now. Wafa says, you talked about failures and learnings. I cannot visualize you failing at something, but that's why I'm curious to learn about what you consider as a failure that you learned from, and how did you benefit or apply that learning to other situations later on?
Oh, don't get me started. I don't want to get into details, but there are projects and programs I wanted to offer. During my first tenure as dean, I couldn't. There are people I want to recruit. I failed to recruit. I wanted to launch a campaign that would yield additional resources to the school. We did, but not even half what I planned for. So it's how you try to not stop and regret, but try to navigate those challenges and turn them into opportunities. Some of them we manage, but surely some will fail. The one thing I'm always comfortable with, I do not let the last bit of effort pass me by, except when I exert it to the limit. So when things do not happen, that's it. You cannot regret that. You should have done this more or different, maybe differently, but not more. So no, we do have, and I always think of it as a team. Organizations blossom when they think together. Somewhere in the book, I wrote, one of the mottos we shared years ago was one for all for one. So we flourish together. Sometimes we are disappointed together, but we keep on trying. We keep on knocking on the door.
We're coming towards the end of the session, and there are many more questions. Unfortunately, we'll not be able to answer all of them. But I was wondering, Sherif, are there any aspects that you think we have not touched upon today that you would like to, say a few words on?
I would like to touch upon something you and I are very passionate about, which is how I see or try to see the future of business and management education. Obviously, it's a $1 million question, and every single circle, faculty, deans, whatever, of the different constituents, and the endless discussions between the business sector, economic sector, and business schools in different roundtables. How can business schools keep on supplying the market with the change agents, the movers and shakers of tomorrow? I actually think that this is going to be continuously changing. Business schools are going to remain as playing a key role in shaping societies, but they need to act fast. We all know that academic institutions tend to be slow. I mean, that's the DNA. And that hence my comment as not the dean, but the CEO of an intellectual enterprise. But we need to do better than that. Of course, we don't operate in silos. We're part of a university and a bigger institution, but we need to keep on pushing. We need to keep on thinking of innovative offerings, because change will not stop. But it's the pace, our pace of adapting to that change that will actually showcase whether we can keep up with the pressure and with that change or not. Otherwise, we will lose the gap with the market. One of the challenges that we all face these days is that we need to revisit our curriculum, not just to be focused on shareholders' interest, but also integrate the ESGs, the SDGs, the impact on the community, the activities that we do, and not just cosmetics, but it has to be integrated into the curriculum, integrated into our research. And unless the mindset of the faculty and the staff, because the two work hand in hand, of the school, understand that and believe in that purpose, it's the impact. It's not going to be realized the way I think you and I and our fellow deans would be looking at. So the element of societal impact is definitely a point to look at. The last point I want to mention is everybody's thinking the future of learning is going to, the future of work is going to lead to machines replacing people. I actually don't think so. The quality of the people getting out of specific programs, what they study, what they intend to do will still be in demand. But it's how we prepare them and train them to navigate the power and reach and forces that are enabled to us by the fourth industrial revolution. Some things will be automated for sure, but then the human factor remains, to me, as the most important asset. And we as business school, through our business and management education, we should do our best to prepare them for the future.
Sherif, it's been a fascinating and a wonderful 1 hour. I think we have touched upon a number of topics. And of course, the book, is so rich in so many different themes that we only did little justice to all the richness that is there in the book. And I encourage everyone who is, on the seminar to somehow find a way to get a copy of the book. Really, it's worthwhile getting a copy of the book. I can assure you that. And, I myself, I can just say that I have read the book, I think at least twice, maybe 2.5 times. And I must say that, even the second time when I read it now in preparation for this webinar today, I found new insights from the book, and I was thinking myself, this is great inspiration for me personally also to try and do something similar. So I think, you inspire people with your achievement and with your book and other things that you've done. And certainly you've done that to me also, Sherif. So thank you so much for, I think, this gift of an experience you're sharing with everyone. I think, this is one way you can actually inspire other people around you. I know a lot of people in Egypt and AUC are inspired by, the things that you have done over your wonderful career and your wonderful, life. I know that your family is very important. And I think together, all of you make a great, family and very powerful family unit. So all the very best to your wife and to your daughter and son too. I look forward to, continuing my friendship with you and learning from you, and also being able to work perhaps on different projects with you. And I'd like to thank everyone who joined here today for joining us. I know it's giving us an hour of your time these days. It's an enormous commitment. So thank you for doing so. I hope you found the seminar and the discussion useful. And I'm sure it'll give you added energy and excitement and inspiration to connect further with Dean Sherif Kamel. Thank you, Sherif.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Soumitra, for your time and for these interesting questions and for actually moderating this session. Trust me, we all learn from each other, and that's why we keep on pushing each other to be better at whatever we do. So thank you so much, and I sincerely look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you.